So is a 2014 or 2015 Infiniti Q50 worth the purchase today in 2022? That is a very important question, a good question at that, and a very, very popular question these days as well. So here we are back in the saddle, the mobile command center today in my 2015 Infiniti Q50. If you guys are new to the channel, I have over 350 Q50 specific videos on the channel, so check it out if you don't mind. So let's just dive right into the question today and get into it, and we'll get started with some pros and cons, and then I'll end with sort of my opinion on whether or not the 2014-2015, the VQ37 Infiniti Q50 is worth the purchase now in 2022. Maybe it'll help you make your decision, or maybe it'll help you feel better about your decision if you just happen to purchase one. But nonetheless, let's get into it. So like any good pros and cons list, let's start with the pros. So as you likely know, the 2014 and 2015 Q50 is outfitted with the VQ37 engine platform. It has built a reputation on reliability and longevity, so you have that going for it. Again, this VQ platform has been around for decades now at this point, so Nissan Infiniti engineers have had the opportunity to really refine it and maximize its potential as best they possibly could. So it's a pretty solid platform, and it's well renowned in the enthusiast community. Rated at about 320 crank horsepower from the factory, it makes pretty decent horsepower, about 280-ish to the wheels, and that's right out of the box. So if you're interested in modifying the vehicle, you can get some basic bolt-ons in a tune and get closer to 330, 340 wheel horsepower, which is pretty decent. It's acceptable. If you're just looking for a vehicle that you don't touch, that runs pretty well and makes some decent power and torque right out of the box, not too bad. The Infiniti Q50 comes equipped with a 7-speed automatic transmission, and it's geared relatively mildly with, I think, 3.13 gearing. So it's not so great in stop-and-go traffic. You probably get around 18, 19, maybe 20-ish miles per gallon. But on those long highway road trips, you can get 30 miles to the gallon without much trouble. Despite what some people say about the 7-speed automatic transmission, it's actually not that bad. In stock form, the car rides and performs quite nicely. It's got kind of soft suspension. It's sort of a luxury sport inspired type vehicle, so you can expect a nice comfortable ride. The interior is clean and classy, I think relatively timeless, and for its time, 2014 and 2015, it actually looked pretty good. There are a number of trim levels to choose from, although in my opinion the difference between each of them is really not all that much. Some different interior styling, like wood grain rather than this sort of faux carbon fiber stuff. You can move up to the Sport, where you have the upgraded brake, the Akebono brake package, a different bumper, real leather seats, vented seats, things of that nature. Paddle shifters, of course, for the Sport. A lot of these things can be done relatively inexpensively if you just want to go with a base model or a lower level trim package. You can add the shifters for a couple $100. You can upgrade to the Akebono brakes for $1,000 or so. Interior is one thing that's a little more spendy if you want to swap out, but these non-sport seats really aren't all that bad in my opinion. They're comfortable. I don't like the feel necessarily of the material, but they're pretty durable, you know, for the age that they are. They look like they have not had much traffic on them at all. So take it as you will. Taking it back to modifications for a little bit, if you're into that kind of thing, the aftermarket support for this platform is substantial. Because there's a lot of overlap in terms of performance parts between the G37, the 370Z, and the Q50, there's parts that are readily available and for relatively good prices as well. Similar thing holds true when we're talking about maintenance and upkeep. A lot of things overlap. They made a ton of these vehicles, so prices for parts and for maintenance type of items, prices really aren't all that bad, and parts are quite available. So that's one positive thing to note. So there's definitely a lot of pluses, a lot of positives, a lot of pros on the list here for the Infiniti Q50, both 2014 and 2015, but there are some negatives to take into consideration as well. So let's dive right into those. Right off the rip, first thing you got to think about is that the fact that these cars are 7 or 8 years old now at this point, right? So a lot of them are approaching that 75, 80,000, 100,000 mile point. Some of them, after depreciation, have gotten in the hands of younger folks who generally tend not to take as good of care as their vehicles. Warranties have run out, so things aren't maybe being as maintained or kept up properly. But just in general, you got to keep in mind the fact that because of the age and the mileage on a lot of these vehicles now, it's inevitable that parts are going to fail. The rear diff bushing, for example, is one that is commonly failing now at this point. I hear it more and more every single day, and unfortunately there's no replacement for that rear diff bushing. You have to replace the entire rear subframe, which dealerships are quoting $2,000+ to do. So that's a little stinger. Make sure you check out the rear end and see if that diff bushing is leaking. It's not a deal breaker, or it's not a killer to drive with the rear diff bushing that is leaking or that has failed. A lot of people will drive on their vehicles and not even know that it's failed. But over a long period of time, long-term scenario, it could potentially become a problem. The blend door actuator for the AC system, that tends to fail quite commonly as well. The 7-speed automatic transmission, the valve body seems to be going out on a number of these vehicles at the 40, 50, 70,000 mile point. And that's just sort of hit or miss. I mean, we hear about it a lot, but there's a lot of these vehicles on the road as well. So you have to take into consideration the ratio, how many are failing out of how many that are on the road. So it's just something to be aware of, something to keep in mind. You can get replacement valve bodies or replacement transmissions. You can upgrade to the VR30, the newer model, 7-speed automatic transmission. It's doable. It's a little bit expensive, but there's options available. It's not like it's a killer. I don't want to go into all sorts of detail about parts that fail. I actually have a video about discussing 8 of the most common failures on the Q50, so check that video out if you're really concerned about potential parts failing on this car. But just know that with age and with mileage, things start to happen. That's just common sense. The next thing I would talk about is back to the modification point. If you're really into modifying vehicles, and I've talked about this in previous videos, but if you're new to the channel, this might be interesting to you. Unfortunately, although the VQ37 is a pretty highly refined engine platform, the downside of that is that we really can't pull any more power out of this thing. It's pretty easy to get from the 280 factory wheel horsepower up to 340, even 350 wheel horsepower. Unfortunately, beyond that, it gets quite expensive, and you quickly get into a diminishing return. What I mean by that is you can put a couple $1,000s on exhaust, intakes, and a tune and make 340 wheel horsepower. You can then spend several $1,000s. Headers, E85 conversion, imported upper and lower intake manifold, etc., cams potentially, and still only make 360 wheel horsepower. So you can get to 340 easily and quite inexpensively. To get to 350, 360, and 370, which is where you're really starting to top out if you're staying naturally aspirated, it's going to take thousands more dollars, and that's no good. What I like about it, though, is that because of all the other supporting modifications out there, you can really make this car perform quite well. You can maximize its performance in terms of horsepower up to the 340 point, but then with suspension, tires, sway bars, braking upgrades, and things of that nature, you can really make the car feel good. So that goes back to the positive side, but on the negative side, you're sort of limited on the amount of power you can make keeping it naturally aspirated. Now, if you go forced induction, you can really pull some gains out of it, of course, but then we're talking high dollar stuff. One thing that people do consider as a con is the infotainment system. They say it's a little bit outdated, a little bit glitchy potentially, or laggy, particularly in the 2014, where they had some delay issues for the apps loading. So that'd be one recommendation we can talk about in a minute. If you're going to look at a VQ37 Q50, I would steer you more toward the 15, where some of those bugs were worked out. But one thing I would say to those people that think the interior is outdated is that these are 7 and 8 year old vehicles, and in 2014 and 15, I think this wasn't all that bad. Now, sure, it might not compare to an Audi or a BMW, but I consider them still to be in a little bit different class. Now, with that being said, the problem, in my opinion, really is the fact that they didn't change the interior even to 18, 19, and 20, and even now it very, very closely resembles, if you look at a 2022 Q50, very, very closely resembles a 2014 Q50. So that, in my opinion, is a problem. But looking at it for what it is, a 2014 and 2015 Q50, if we were sitting here in 2015, I think this is a pretty solid interior, in my opinion. The last negative thing I want to talk about on this list is the used car market in general. Everything is hyperinflated. Inflation is running rampant in general, which is a totally different conversation, but the used car market has been hit particularly hard over the last year or so. The Infiniti Q50 market is no different. Just to give you an idea, just a little bit of an illustration, I recently got a purchase price offer from Carvana for my 2015 Infiniti Q50 with 70,000 miles on it, base trim, no spoiler, no navigation, no paddle shifters, no brake upgrade, nothing, just a base model Infiniti Q50. They offered me $21,500 worth. $21,500. Just to put this into perspective, I purchased this car in 2018, almost 4 years ago now at this point, for $19,500. It was like $21,000 something out the door, tax, title, license, all that, the whole 9 yards. I literally drove this car for free for almost 4 years, and I put over 40,000 miles on it. That's insane. If I were to sell this car to Carvana right now, I would completely break even, having driven it for 4 years and putting 40,000 miles on it. So with that being said, no car purchase is worth it right now. Nothing is worth it. Everything is outrageously inflated. It's so annoying and it's nonsense, and the market will correct. So just keep that in mind also. If you're spending inflated prices on a vehicle right now, chances are in 2 or 3 years, it's going to be worth significantly less. Now, with the economics talk aside, do I think the 2014 or 2015 Infiniti Q50 is worth the purchase right now in 2022? In my opinion, the pros heavily outweigh the cons. I think it is a good purchase in terms of what you get in a vehicle compared to some other vehicles on the road. I think you have an engine platform that is tried and true and tested, has been highly refined by Nissan engineers over the decades now at this point. It's built a reputation on longevity and durability. Now, there are some drawbacks in terms of parts that cannot be replaced, like the rear diff bushing and a 7-speed automatic transmission that seems to have valve body issues. But again, I think overall the platform is solid, and I think if you do your due diligence, you make sure you find out who owned the vehicle prior, you take a look at service records, maybe potentially purchase an extended warranty now at this point if you can. I think it's a good buy. The one thing I would say is move up to the 2015 rather than the 14 and just kind of, get past some of those glitches. Anytime there's a changeover, or the new style comes out of a vehicle for the first generation of a particular vehicle, there's going to be some glitches and some bugs that need to be worked out. For the most part, that was worked out into 2015, and I think it's a solid platform to get yourself into. I think you'd really enjoy it. Decent power, relatively comfortable. It performs quite well compared to a lot of vehicles you'll see on your daily commute. If you're into modifying the vehicle and upgrading, doing things of that nature, there's some potential left in it in terms of power, but certainly some potential left in how the car handles and feels on the road. I'm certainly not saying there's no other vehicles on the road that I wouldn't purchase over this one. There's arguments to be made for a lot of different vehicles, whether it's better in this way or that way. All I'm saying is that a Q50 is a decent purchase. If you're looking for a rear-wheel drive vehicle that makes decent power and performs quite well, or maybe an all-wheel drive variation of it, the Q50 checks a lot of boxes. It's just a nice, comfortable ride that is built on a really pretty solid platform. One positive I forgot to point out is that the body lines of the Q50, it is a very beautifully designed vehicle. Aesthetically, it looks really nice. The wheel design maybe is a little bit questionable, but that's easy to change, right? I think overall, like I said, the pros heavily outweigh the cons, and if you're interested in an Infiniti Q50 at this point, the VQ37, the 3.7 liter 6-cylinder naturally aspirated Q50, I'd recommend one. I'm a little bit partial, but I would certainly recommend one. Again, move more toward the 2015 if you have a choice between the two, but do your due diligence. These are 7 and 8-year-old vehicles now at this point, so good luck to you in your search. Or if you purchased one recently and you're just trying to get some affirmation on your decision, congratulations to you. You'll enjoy it. If you have any questions or concerns about the Q50, again, I have over 350 dedicated Q50 videos on this channel, so check them out. Thank you guys very much for watching. I appreciate the continued support. Subscribe if you haven't already. Thanks again. We'll see you in the next one.